Hi, I'm Derrick Watson, and this is
Goodman.
So Shane, what position you want to choose?
I'm going to be taking position A, which is about immersing yourself into literature and using it more for pleasure. And you're choosing?
Position B, we're saying how I feel as though a lot of people use reading as a way to like learn more about the world instead of using it as pleasure. So since you choose position A, you want to go first?
I know for me personally, I look at literature more as a way to escape the world and to kind of just drown out anything that's going on and really just focus on what the plot itself is entailing. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, what I do is I'm very visual when I read. So like in my mind, I kind of immerse myself in the book as if I am one of the characters, or like almost like as if I'm watching a movie in my head. And I know for me, it's just a way to kind of de-stress and to really focus on the simple aspects and not have to think about things while I'm reading. I can do that later if I choose to.
Yeah. I used to do that too when I was younger. Like that's how I got more into like graphic novels and comic books, because as a kid, like you love to imagine things, and I would use like comics as a way to escape the real world and stuff. But as I got older and I got more into reading, like I started to use literature as a way of learning more about the world that I didn't know of. Like for example, I would use like reading. I would learn about different cultures, because like where I grew up in a city where like, and all my life I went to like predominantly black schools, so I didn't know much about other cultures. So I use like reading as a way to like not only like enjoy stories, but also to learn about different like races of people.
Okay, you bring up a very good point. Why don't we focus on what kind of literature are we talking about first? Are we talking about like the canon, or are we talking about like typical young adult lit or something like that? Like what does it vary your position whenever you change on what type of text you're reading, or are you typically the same throughout?
It depends. Mostly growing up, I was more into like mystery and science fiction, so it can be different, because like I can say I can really get into reading more when it comes to science fiction and mystery over like something like romance, like Jane Austen. But like I appreciate Jane Austen for like the moral lesson or like message she's trying to convey to readers, and like I can understand, and it makes me want to learn more about it. But the way that she writes it is just I can't get into it. That's why I'm like more gravitated to like mystery and science fiction, because it's always a different way of like trying to grab somebody's attention.
I can definitely agree with that. I know, me personally, I read a lot of fictional horror, and as I'm growing older, like I'm noticing, I'll gravitate more towards nonfiction books, as long as they still are like that mystery, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
But I know for me, even when I'm reading something like Jane Austen, for example, I can't get through the book unless I immerse myself in it and just kind of block everything else out, and then maybe later go back and think about it. But while I'm reading, I can't like make that connection, especially with, as cliche as it is to say, like a book is dry is something that Jane Austen writes.
Yeah.
And I know like that's personal opinion, but it just doesn't grab my attention like some of the other books that I read. So like I really have to try to immerse myself in it to even get through the book, let alone get anything out of it later.
Yeah. I'm like that too, especially when I first read Jane Austen. I didn't read Jane Austen until last semester for one of my classes, and I found it boring as hell, to be honest with you. But the way I look at reading and stuff, like I like to put myself in the book too, so that way I can get more into it. Like I keep on bringing up comics, but that's why I love to read.
Yeah.
Like I used to put myself into the comics so that way like I want to relate to it and I feel like I was a part of that world. But as I got more into it, I kind of learned that the different aspects in that literature was based off the world. For example, X-Men.
Yeah.
Professor X and Magneto, they're based off of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X.
Really?
Yeah, because Martin Luther King Jr. was Professor X because he wanted equal rights for blacks and whites, just like Professor X wanted equal rights for mutants and humans. And Magneto is Malcolm X because he wanted equal rights for mutants, but he wasn't afraid to go in a hostile way of doing it, just like Malcolm X wasn't ready to do that for blacks. So it's funny, it's kind of cool when you get more, when you read more, the more you learn about the world in different aspects that you never thought of. I'm trying to think of another book. Like, it's a book I read in 11th grade called The Handmaid's Tale, and it was about a society of women, and they were all controlled by one man, and like he will pick one of the women into like and have a child by like every year, and it kind of like connects the world as in like how males have a dominant control over women, and still in this age today.
Now, did you find that connection when you were reading it? Like, as you're reading, like, that kind of came to you? Or was it more like thinking back onto it?
It was more thinking back onto it. At the time, I was just trying to put myself in that story, but like, I felt, because I read that book twice, so but going back to it, I kind of saw more. I started seeing different aspects. I'm like, wait, this kind of relates to this that's in society right now. So
I know that also, for me, it's really hard for me to reread a book, and it's mostly just because anytime I reread something, I just skip ahead to the part that I know is coming up, or anything like that. And I've only found a few books that I've actually been able to sit down and reread in full. And I personally wish I could do it more, but it's almost like, for me, it's like once I immerse myself into the book, it makes it that much harder to break away from the original story.
yeah,
Which is one downside to it that I can see. But I also feel like it makes it easier for me later on to look back on the story, because instead of like trying to find like how this relates to different things, like I'm making up my own like vision in my head for how it should be.
yeah.
So like I feel in that aspect like it's easier for me to look back on things, but at the same time it's easier for me to go back and look at it from a different angle.
I feel you. I think that's what a good book is supposed to do. Like, I feel as though a book should make you want to like put yourself in that character's shoes and feel like you're in that world, but at the same time, it should also open your eyes to the world around you too. Like, I'll give you another book. It's a book called Passing by Nella Larson, and it's about biracial black people, and it's about a woman who meets her childhood friend many years later, and they're both biracial, but the main character, she accepts more of her black side because that's what she grew up around, and the other character, although she was raised around black people, years later she went to live with her white side, and she like rejects her black side now. And I was able to put myself into the shoes because I had friends that dealt with problems like that, and also I was still like, I gravitated to the story because it was a good story.
Yeah.
But it also relates to something that's a real life problem, and even today. So I think that's what a good book is supposed to do. That's just me.
So kind of off topic a little bit. What do you think? Do you think that people are writing more now about real life events than in past? Because I know, like, especially looking back on books that I read, and even like the futuristic like dystopia books and things like that, like a lot of them are even based around stuff that we're going on now that seems like it could happen next week. Like a book that I read last semester called Feed. It's a futuristic book, and granted, like the main story takes place in space. They live on a giant spaceship up in space, and it holds, I think, like 500 people or something like that. But they have chips embedded in their head, and it allows them to focus on, like, they can just pull up anything, like Facebook, anything on the internet. It has, like, it's pretty much like their phone, like they can just send messages to each other,
Yeah.
and things like that. And one day the feed goes out, and these friends have to go and just kind of survive pretty much without what they're used to. Like they've grown up with it, and it makes me think like, yeah, we don't have chips in our head, although there's a patent out for contact lenses that you can search the web on and stuff. So I feel like we're getting close to that.
Mm-hmm.
But what would happen if all of a sudden all of electricity just went out?
Yeah.
Like, how would we react? So, like, looking back on that story, like, I can clearly see the inspiration behind it. But when I was reading it, like, it didn't click at the time, I guess, or just, I didn't really put that much thought into it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I feel as though, like, when it comes to like writing about things that you can see possibly happen either now or in the future, I feel as though a lot of writers love to do it because I feel as though people are more like open to it now. Whereas like back then it was more, reading was more of a thing where, I just want to read for pleasure. Where now people are like, I guess can open their eyes to literature more. Like for me, when I got into Harry Potter at a young age and stuff, like I just thought it was like wizards and casting spells and stuff like that. And like when I think of Harry Potter, I still don't really think of a thing like an issue that still goes on in today's society. Obviously, you won't see a dragon flying in the sky or anything, but at the same time, it's like they had like relatable characters that people can see themselves in. And you can see characters like that in society now, like Dumbledore, like a father figure, or was almost like a father figure to Harry. People can relate to that because they have somebody in their life that's like that, or like friends like Hermione and Ron. Even though that person doesn't have a friend like that, they can see that a person like that, whether they go to school, the neighborhood.
So you mentioned an interesting point of people are more open to that kind of literature now.
Yeah.
And being able to relate to it. Why do you think that is?
What's the question?
Like, what has changed since Shakespeare to now that really allowed people to kind of open their mind up and see things differently?
I wouldn't have a right answer for it, but like, I know back then, I seen like a lot of people like were into arts for pleasure, like going to plays and stuff. But when people went to plays back then, they saw that as a regular thing. It's rare to hear somebody say, "Oh, I want to go see a play now." Like only a few people I know actually like going to see plays or like still read and stuff. Where you just hear about one or two people saying, like, "Oh yeah, I love reading and stuff like that." I feel as though writing has become more based on our society today, but just like in a different way, like science fiction. Like even though have like aliens or wizards and stuff like that, but it's still elements that are still real that bring people closer into reading. Whereas literature back then, it still did the same thing, but it was more for the enjoyment. That kind of answers it.
Yeah, it does. I think a big thing too is the fact that with technology, we have everything at the tips of our fingers.
That's true.
And people want something different, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't even read as much as I would like to anymore.
Yeah.
Because why would I read it when I can watch something that has kind of the same base story?
Exactly.
And it'll take me less time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that definitely technology has been a big part of that.
Exactly.
And honestly, I feel like that's why a lot of people see your position as being what is trying to be taught in school as compared to just being able to read for fun.
Yeah.
And not have to look for anything behind it. And I think that that's one thing I hope I don't ever grow out of is just, I wish I was able to read more and make those connections as I'm reading, because I think it would definitely change my story. But I also want to be able to read just to read and not have to make those connections.
You brought up a good point about how technology has kind of changed the way we read and stuff, because like I said, back then people read for enjoyment and stuff, and I feel as a reading, like you need an imagination in order to get into a story. Nowadays with technology, we have movies, so if we want to be entertained on a visual level, and use our imaginations, we can just look at a movie and like see like visual effects and stuff. People don't want to read like words in the book when they can just see Harry Potter flying on a dragon by himself.
Very true, very true.
What's going to be more entertaining, reading it or actually looking at it?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons why writers, they kind of want to connect like real life issues into the book, so that way, alright, even though like technology is taking over when it comes to movies and stuff, this subject right here is really happening. So maybe this will catch their eye even more, but we'll just do it in a more creative way.
So you bring up a good point, and you touched upon it already. With graphic novels, and they've been exploding lately.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's kind of a way to reintroduce people to reading?
I would say yes. I think a lot of people like kind of, I won't say frown down upon graphic novels. I think they just don't take it seriously enough. It's because like when we think of reading with pictures, we mostly think of for kids and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, graphic novels are cool because like they also present like a darker tone story to it, and they also can present like real life issues into it. Hell, Dr. Seuss, like as fun as those books were as kids, they still like talked about real life issues and stuff like that too. But we just didn't think about it because we were too young to think about it. You know, so I think graphic novels are the next step of like introducing kids into reading, even at a college level.
I definitely agree with that. I know, and I ashamed to say it now, but I had that mindset, like look down upon graphic novels.
Yeah.
But last semester I took young adult literature, and one of the books I had to read was The Walking Dead. And it, you know, and one of the big things too is like people think of graphic novels, and a lot of people, you know, I generally think of it as like a comic book.
Yeah.
But The Walking Dead, at least I don't know about all graphic novels, and I know not all of them are like this, but The Walking Dead is broken up into volumes.
Yeah.
And then it's broken up into chapters within those volumes. So we had to read all of volume 1, and we, like, the book itself was like this big. And it allows, I definitely think it allows for more to go into the story, especially when you get, most graphic novels are thicker than what a general book would be because you have to space everything out to allow for the pictures.
That's true.
But it definitely allows, it still allows for that creativity that you can get in immersion, but it also gives a guideline to what you can follow. And I think that's a great tool that is definitely underused in society.
Yeah. I like what you say, and I also feel as though like graphic novels give more of the they bring back to reading the more of the visual element that like I feel like a lot of books lack versus going to see a movie, because like I said before, like when you go see a movie, it's right there, the visual effects and stuff, special like Transformers or something like that. Graphic novels, you're actually seeing it. You're actually seeing like two people interact. You're actually seeing like them fighting and stuff like that. So. And when it comes to like reading regular text, it's like, yeah, you can like imagine it and stuff like that. But like I said, we live in a generation where technology has like taken over like for years when it comes to movies. So people really want to see stuff more than they want to read. And graphic novels are a great way to do it now, because like not only are you getting kids to read literature and try like, I don't know, like comprehend the issues that the book is trying to convey to them, but also you're getting them to like be hooked onto it with that visual element. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, definitely. You brought up a point about movies kind of dominating for years, and one thing I want to bring up is I personally am starting to see that kind of slowly die out. But the real question is like, there's no clear cut answer on what is going to be the next movie. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Like about
what do you think would be the next thing to take over, and why that platform?
I really don't know. Really, I mean, like I feel as though movies are getting more creative. Like I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. Like the movie that won Best Picture was called The Artist, and it was a silent movie. And it's like it was no talking or anything. It was just them just like interacting. Like you see them dancing and stuff like that. And like when you think of like winning movies of the year, it's like what it didn't win for special effects, it didn't win for this. It just won for Best Picture. Because, and so it basically just won for the story, even though like you had to try like comprehend it on your own. So it's like I feel as though like movies won't die out, but they'll keep on getting more creative.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't think they're gonna go away. I think the platform we watch them on is definitely gonna change.
Yeah.
I know, like me personally, I don't really watch like television or what we typically think of as television.
Yeah.
Generally, most of the stuff I do is streaming offline. And I definitely think that that's a direction that it's going to go.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I'm also wondering, you know, you have, like I said before, you have all this technology at your fingertips.
Yeah.
So my question is, for literature in general, what's going to happen? Like, we're slowly seeing like a shift over to ebooks and stuff like that, but a lot of people complain that they don't like reading on a screen, and then you get the complaints of people who just don't read. So like, I'm slowly seeing literature dying out, and I'm wondering, you know, what is the future of literature?
What is the future of literature? Like, it's hard to say because, like I said, we live in a generation like where technology is so dominant. So it's like, and it's like if you want to read nowadays, like you have to do that on your choice. Like, like teachers tell you that you gotta read this book for the class assignment and stuff like that. You can't. You really don't even have to do that nowadays because it's Spark Notes and stuff like that. Like, so reading is more of a choice than anything. I feel as though like, and if I feel as though if a lot of people want to save like the art of literature, I feel as though writers are going to have to start on writing ways of finding new ways to write that literature that can attract to the next generation. And there's a few writers that can do it, like John Green. He's not one of my favorite writers, but like he does write about the coming of age story, like Fault in Our Stars and what Paper Town, like about teenagers and stuff, growing up and stuff and dealing with like teenage problems and stuff. I feel as though more literature should be, be like that. So.
See, I personally feel like it's not even up to the writers, because I feel like the writers are doing a great job at writing the stories. Like, I really haven't picked up a book lately that's been, like, that has been written for young adult lit, especially because that's what I read most.
Yeah.
I really haven't picked up a book that I haven't enjoyed. I think that the biggest factor is the way that literature is represented in our schools.
Yes.
Especially the fact, like, we talk about the canon and how, English teachers are always like, you have to read this because we said so.
Yeah.
And I definitely think if you just allowed more choice in schools and allowed students to go out and actually find something they like rather than telling them you have to do this.
Yeah.
Because, teenagers aren't going to do what they are told to do anyway.
Yeah.
Let alone go out and do something, and not saying reading is always a daunting task, but when you're asking a high school student who's already in so many other extracurricular activities, already has homework, other things like that, to add on a 200-page book that needs to be read by the end of the week.
Yeah.
It's really difficult for them, especially when you're telling them they have to do it. They're not going to do it. And like you said, with technology at our fingertips, it's so easy to just go on Spark Notes and just look up whatever it is you want to look up.
Yeah. You bring up a good point about about teachers telling you to read and stuff. Like, the thing I kind of hated like in middle school and high school about that is when you're in class, if you don't like a certain literature that's in the canon, then automatically you're dumb. Like, I feel teachers didn't say that obviously, but they made a student feel like that. It's like, well, if you don't like this writer or you don't like this book, how can you be like an English major or something like that? Or how can you actually enjoy reading if you don't like one of these founding writers? It's like, you know how many fucking people are in the world? You know what I'm saying? So, and it's like, I feel like you said, I feel as though you should like give the student a choice of what to read, whether it's like in the canon or not, because at the end of the day, what matters is the student is reading, period.
I agree with that, and I feel like one of the biggest problems is teachers, when something gets difficult, they fall back on what they were taught,
Yeah.
not how they were taught to do it. So, and I think that, you know, especially we have, you know, our education system is built to produce mass amounts of graduates.
Yeah.
It's not individualized like we'd like to think it is. You know, we have programs like No Child Left Behind and Common Core and stuff like that that's trying, they're saying that they're trying to be individualized, but realistically they're just trying to make it the easiest version possible to appeal to more people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the biggest problems we have is, you know, when a teacher is required to teach, you know, 8 classes a day with 30 students in each class,
Yeah.
it's really hard to get that individualized feel. So it's so much easier for them to just be like, you have to read this or else like that there's no other option.
Yeah. I agree with you saying, like, sometimes it's not really the teacher's fault because they have so many students they have to teach, so they feel like in order to like teach each class of students, they have to follow this like format that's been passed on for years in the teaching department and stuff. But at the same time, me personally, I feel as though you're kind of robbing some kids of that creativity, because if you're teaching it the same way, how are you going to inspire them to like be creative when it comes to reading literature? How are you going to inspire them to like read text differently and stuff if you're teaching them the exact same format that you taught your first class? You know?
Especially, you know, you get teachers who, you know, you'll get students who are creative and do think outside of the box.
Yeah.
Especially with, you know, the way they interpret a text or something like that. Then the teacher's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, that just kind of diminishes everything that the student put into that. Like, you're telling me that everything I read was wrong. Like, obviously I don't know what I'm doing, type thing. And then people get discouraged and then they don't want to read.
Exactly.
So it's just like an endless cycle that I think definitely needs to be stopped. But the problem is trying to figure out a way to do that.
Exactly. That's the main problem. And you brought up a good point. It's like, if you look at a text differently than the, like other 10 people in the class, then the teacher tells you that you're wrong and that whatever you think is like is invalid. So I have friends that got told that by teachers, and that made them not even want to read anymore, because they said, well, if I can't interpret this story in my own way, like I pictured it in my mind, then why should I read anyway if I'm just going to have to look at this reading in your way, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else you want to cover?
No, that's about it for me.
All right, sounds good.